This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and I hope everybody had a good Christmas, and I wish everybody a Happy New Year. Now today we have two phonographs we're going to look at. We have a Crosley crap box from I think 2015, or a hot snot box would be more accurate. And then we have this old school Westinghouse one tube wonder record player from 1959. Now I've heard people in recent times compare the Crosleys to the old one tube wonders as both of them being equally junky. Well, back in the 1950s and 60s, something like this was considered the junky crap box by most of your TV and radio servicemen, but even this junky crap box from the 1950s is better than this junky crap box from 2015, and we'll compare the two. First of all, I'll tell you a little something about the Crosley. It's one I picked up cheap, and when I got it, the head shell was loose, and the reason it was loose is because the screw in the tone arm tube, let me back up, the screw hole in the tone arm tube was walled out, and the screw would not get tight. And even back here where it attaches to the rear, it was just about as bad. So I removed the tone arm and took some JB weld and permanently attached everything in place, so we don't have to worry about the head shell getting loose anymore. The only problem is these types of tone arms, and I see this on all of these, are very sloppy at the rear end, as you can tell. As far as the cartridge, the original cartridge, which is a cheap Chinese clone of a Chuo-Denshi's CZ800, the needle on that cartridge was shot. I didn't have a needle, and if I was going to replace the needle, I'd just as soon order a genuine Chuo-Denshi cartridge, because those Chinese clone cartridges often have needles that are hard to replace. Well, I had this Bampa cartridge with a flip needle on hand, and by the time I ordered a new Chuo-Denshi cartridge, I'd have done just as well to just go ahead and put the flip cartridge on here that I already had, so that's what I did. And at least now we have an LP and 78 flip stylus, which you don't have with the other type. You have to physically change the needles over if you want to play 78s. I also had to adjust the motor speed, which is a common problem on these, and the auto stop, where it would not turn off before the end of the record. Now we'll open this up and see what the inside looks like. Okay, we have the Crosley open. First we'll look at the speakers. They're very tiny, and they have a very limited frequency response, despite the fact that the packaging that these record players come in claim full range speakers. So naturally you're not going to get very good sound out of these. Adding insult to injury, the amplifier does not have the proper input impedance for a ceramic cartridge, which further cuts your low end response. And then if we look here at the mechanism, we can see the generous supply of hot snot that they have holding everything together. And yes, this mechanism is held in place with screws, but those little plastic studs tend to get brittle and break. So that's why they have all the hot snot here, to help hold things together. Then we look at the little DC drive motor here. Those tend to be failure prone, and when those die, there's really not a whole lot you can do with them. Yes, you can order them off of the internet. They're plentiful on eBay, and that same style of motor has been used in basically every cheap turntable and record player since the late 1980s. You know, you can get replacement motors, but is it really worth it? Amplifier board here is pretty small. This one's not as bad as some I've seen, but a lot of these have surface mounted components on them that are very hard to deal with, and servicing them is really out of the question. We have all this plastic crap here. And like I said, when the plastic gets old, it ages and gets brittle and breaks. I will say the cabinetry on these are probably about as good as you could ever get with these little portable record players. The cabinets are probably the nicest thing about them. And these Crosleys run off of a cheap switching wall wart, which is nothing but a noise generator for AM radio. And if you happen to lose the wall wart, then you're not going to be using your record player, whereas the old stuff from the 50s and 60s had a hardwired power cord on it. Now, of course, we know why they do it this way with the Crosleys, because these are sold worldwide, and that way, for whatever region they're sold in, they can provide whatever adapter is needed to power it off of whatever your AC mains power happens to provide. And also, these cheap wall warts, they have been known to short out and go up in smoke and or malfunction and send way too much voltage to the device that they're plugged into, causing the device to go up in smoke and flames. Now, looking at the Westinghouse, like the Crosley, it has a cheap plastic tone arm on it too that's kind of wobbly at the rear end, so in that regard, both tone arms are probably about equal to each other. But on the Westinghouse, we have a nice metal turntable platter. We have a nice wooden cabinet here. The motor is an AC motor with an all-metal mechanism with idler wheel drive. We'll open it up in just a second. Unlike the Crosley, this one actually has a tone control. The Crosley does not. Looking under the hood of the Westinghouse, the amplifier chassis is a nice metal chassis that's wired point to point that can easily be serviced with off-the-shelf components. And if we look at the drive mechanism, you see a nice big AC motor here that rarely ever gives trouble, and when they do give trouble, it generally only involves needing to be taken apart, cleaned, and lubricated. And if something happens, like a bushing wears out or something, there's enough of these phonographs in circulation that it's usually not too hard to find a motor and a junk phonograph somewhere to get it back going. And then we have a 4-inch speaker down here. Now, granted, this is only a mono record player, but I would rather have a mono record player that sounds decent than a cheapo stereo record player that sounds like a tin can. Now, granted, the Westinghouse doesn't have the line output jacks that the Crosley has, but that's really no big deal, because if I was going to connect a turntable to an external sound system, I'd want it to be a decent turntable that would give me good results. This Crosley plugged into an external sound system is still not going to give you very good results because of the impedance matching issue with the amplifier. Now, the Crosley tone arm tracks lighter than the one on the Westinghouse, but given the crude nature of both tone arms, you know, they're still not very great for records. Now, they won't wear records out as fast as some people claim they will, but they will wear them out faster than playing them on a decent component-style turntable. Oh, and by the way, last but not least, this one was made in China. This one was made in the United States, and the United States is where we should still be making everything, but that probably won't happen again. Okay, we've now switched to the newer camera because it does a better job at reproducing audio than the old one, and we're going to do some listening comparison between the Crosley and the Westinghouse. So we'll start out with a 45 of Little Richard. You see the Westinghouse has tone control. And it also gets louder than the Crosley, even though the cartridge in this Westinghouse has lower output than the one that came in it originally. Alright, now let's get an LP. And that's wide open. And now on the Westinghouse. And now a 78 on the Crosley, being played with a proper 3mm needle. I'll have to say the 78 probably sounds better than the 33 and 45 RPM records did on the Crosley, but still not great. Alright, let's try it on the Westinghouse. And the Westinghouse again is a bit bolder than the Crosley. Now this needle may actually be a dual LP tip on this Westinghouse, but you still get the idea. But the thing is, some people can look at my little demonstration and clearly see which one's better, but there's other people that no matter how much you try to show them, they'll never be convinced. And that's fine, you know, everybody knows what they want, but I hate people thinking that the new stuff is always better, and then they spend their hard-earned money on it, and then they discover it's not better, and then they've just wasted their money instead of maybe picking up an older one and having it fixed or whatever. But I know I've had people, a guy I know one time, he contacted me and asked me if I had a record player I wanted to sell, that he wanted to buy one for his teenage daughter, and I said, yeah, I've got a school classroom record player fixed up and ready to go. You can have it for 25 bucks, which was less than what I had in it, but it was Christmas time and I was trying to help the guy out. So he said, send me a picture of it and I'll show it to her and see what she thinks about it. So I sent him a picture of it. She looked at it and turned her nose up at it because it wasn't modern and cutesy enough looking for her. And he asked me if I had anything more modern, and I said no, maybe you just need to go to Walmart or wherever and pick her up a new Crosley. Maybe that'll make her happy. And I was thinking back to whenever I was a teenager, if my dad was going to buy something for me, I knew better than to turn my nose up at it, because he would have told me, well, okay, if you don't like it, then I just won't buy you anything, and you can save up your own money and buy whatever it is you want out of your own piggy bank. But you know how it is today. Most of these teenagers are spoiled rotten. Their parents give them anything and everything they want, and then they graduate from high school thinking that they're owed the biggest and the best of everything right out of the gate. You know, forget that working for it and saving for it for 30 or 40 years like their parents did. They want it all, and they want it all right now. Now, as far as this Crosley, there's two things that could make it better. Number one, better speakers. That would help tremendously. Number two, a better designed amplifier that has the proper impedance matching for the cartridge. Now, you might remember a while back we attempted to do a conversion on one of these where I was going to add a buffer stage using FETs between the cartridge and the amplifier input, and I got flustered and ended up EOLing the record player, probably because I really down deep didn't see the point of fooling with it in the first place. But I was reading an article on the internet where somebody actually did add a FET based buffer stage between the cartridge and the amplifier input, and better speakers and a real Chivo cartridge, and he said it made all the difference in the world in the way it sounded. Now I think if Crosley had done that, then these little suitcase portables would sound halfway respectable. And in the grand scheme of things, when they're building 10 billion units, it wouldn't cost them that much more to incorporate those changes into the design, but you know, they're not going to do it. But anyway, enough rambling on. I hope everybody has a great new year. After everybody got their new Crosleys for Christmas, I thought we'd just do a comparison video between an old one and a new one, since we hadn't done it lately. Alright, there you go. Thanks for watching, and maybe on into 2022 we'll get back to some repair projects. Alright, back to the old camera, doing a little experiment to see if I can combine the SD footage from this camera and the HD footage from the other camera. I guess if you're seeing this, you'll know it worked, but you may be asking, well, why can't they make a record player today that's made like this one? Well, number one, cost would be a main factor. In the first place, to my knowledge, there's no company set up with the proper tooling to make these old style Alliance AC motor driven mechanisms anymore. And for a company to retool for that would cost a lot of money. And if they built a record player like that today, it would be several $100s, and your average Walmart shopper is not going to go for that. You know, in today's world, these drive mechanisms here are cranked out by the billions, just like these Alliance mechanisms were cranked out by the billions during the 50s and 60s. Also, General Industries was another player. I think Alliance might have got out of the phono drive business around the mid-70s, I'd say. General Industries, they hung on until the late 90s, I believe. I think Hamilton was about the last one using AC drive motors in their school record players. But to my knowledge, that's pretty much when General Industries folded up, or at least got out of the phono drive business. So we'll say it's been a good 20 years since these AC motor driven phono drives with the metal turntable platter have been made. But with these little cheap mechanisms here, they can crank them out really, really cheaply in China by the billions and slap them in these cheap record players and sell them for 50 or 60 bucks, sometimes even less than that. And that's just the way it is. It's like somebody I know said about the old days, forget about it, they're not coming back. So either we're just going to have to, when it comes to record players, live with this crap, or be willing to pick up an older one and have it fixed and use it and enjoy it. The thing about the old one, it'll still be working 50 years from now if you take care of it, whereas this one likely won't be working 50 years from now.